crafters, this is Raquel from Paintsandglitter, and I'm a crafter for Tonic Studios. Today we are creating a Celebrate with Style presentation box. This die set is a 25-piece die set designed to create both a gift box and also a card that will fit inside of the box if you would like. The card is dimensional if you would like it to be. So I'm going to walk you through all of the elements here. So here you have the portion that creates the actual card front, and it has these tabs on the sides. What those are meant to do is to fold underneath, so that way you get a domed effect on the card, which is really beautiful. But here I want to show you it does come with a solid shadow piece, and then the center portion of that card front is an oval shape. Here all are separate, and I want to show you that. So there's this oval piece here, and this has florals all around. This one is a solid, so if you have a sentiment that would fit inside of that, you could certainly use that, or you can use that in coordination with this piece here, which has a sentiment. This sentiment reads, "I hope all your wishes come true." It's absolutely stunning, so when I cut that out, I'll show you what that looks like. But then here is the background of that card. So this is flanked by some different florals here, which you can certainly color, or you can use the die to cut the papers and then fit them right back inside those little apertures. So there's different ways you can use that. Then as far as the sides of the box, you have these pieces here, and you could either emboss or deboss into your paper. So this is going to leave an impression on your paper which has the floral motifs there as well. And you also have a belly band to close the box that you create, and that comes with its own little layers there, so you see how intricate and beautiful that is. It does have a little floral center there. Then this is one of the sides of the box, which you'll cut out twice. It continues that beautiful design throughout. Then this portion here has what will create the actual base of the box and the lid, and then this one also has the option of a sentiment as well as the other ovals. So let me show you this contrast with the prior one. This oval is the one that will cut into the background. However, this one will deboss into the background. This is the type of die set you want to use with mirror cardstock, so that way you get that beautiful impression on your paper, especially if you're going to use all of those debossing plates. However, you also get another oval here. Now the difference between this one and the one on top is this one has a solid edge, this one has a stippling edge, and this plate here in the center, rather than cutting out the sentiment, this one will also deboss into your paper, and it has these gorgeous swirls with a flower motif at the bottom, and then this one says "Celebrate with Style." So if you have any celebrations, of course, coming up soon, or any pending weddings, then this would be an excellent gift box for that. A little circle here I want to point out to you. That is to help the inside of the box have a bit of sturdiness, so that when you close the lid, it doesn't accidentally flatten the card inside. So I'll show you how to put this together. First, I'm going to cut out some papers and we'll get started with our crafting. To begin, you're going to need a rectangle panel. I've cut mine out of classic card from Tonic Studios in ivory white, and I've also gone ahead and cut it out of 300 GSM cardstock. That's going to actually be the back of this card, and I thought it would be nice to have a place for writing a little note or sentiment on the back. So again, that's the rectangle panel. Your card panel, you're going to want to cut out one piece, and of course there are layering pieces available, but that's going to look like this. And you're going to want to fold the edges, so there are score lines here. So you're going to take the tabs here, fold them back, and make sure you burnish those nicely. I'm going to make sure that I have that correct on both sides here. And burnish that. Now the layering pieces available are going to give you a solid piece what I have done is I've cut that out in white. What this looks like. It's a white layer. I've also cut it out again in white cardstock, only this time around, as you can tell, I have the little floral elements cut into that. So the way that I did that was that I actually used this die, and I was able to cut out this layer here, as you see. And now this is going to go on top of this white layer, and I'll explain why. But using this same die, I once again cut out this golden colored cardstock from Tonic Studios, and it's pearlescent gold. And I just went ahead and cut this. However, I wanted to cut the center portion out, and for that I did use that floral die that's included. That's this one here. So this one does cut the outer edge. It doesn't cut the center, but if you want to cut the center out of this one, that's the die that you will use if you want that size aperture. So we're going to start there. The reason that I've done this is that I want to color the flowers using alcohol markers. So this is going to be an easier way to go about it. So I'm simply going to adhere these two layers together. I'm going to apply a nice bead of adhesive on the edge here. I'm going to center this nicely on top of the other white layer. Now this other layer will be adhered right on top. But before I do that, I'm going to actually color in the florals. So I've got some colors that I think are going to go very nicely with this, and I think I'm going to keep it to a deeper color combination. And I'm going to take, this is called brown sugar, and I'm simply going to use this on some of the petals to give it some depth, but I'm not going to be too terribly careful here because I'm going to color over this. So this is just going to create a shadow for me, and it'll all make sense once I start adding more color. So on top of that color, I'm going to go in with Tiger Lily, and these are all Nouveau markers, of course. So I'm simply going to blend out that initial color that I placed down by coloring right over it. And lastly, I'm going to go in with a lighter color, and I'm going to actually choose the color Fruit Punch as my lightest color on this petal. And I'm avoiding the darker portions, so I'm actually coloring what would be the outer edge of the petals in this case. And this is a bit of a cabbage rose, so I think it's going to look really pretty when it's all said and done. For the leaves, I'm going to use the colors Sandcastle and Coconut instead of green. So I'm simply going to color some of these in and then darken them a little bit, and then I'm going to go over that as well and blend that out. So I'm going to continue coloring this, and I'll be back when I have all of the florals colored in. As you can see, I've colored the entire background here, and it looks a little messy to the eye initially, but you have to remember that you're then going to replace all of that white background with the layer that you can place right on top. So I'm keeping these colors very vibrant on purpose, and I always try to think of the recipient when I choose the colors that I use in a project. But now what I'm going to do is just apply some adhesive here along the edge and try to make sure that I get a really nice application here. Okay, once you've added enough adhesive, then you want to very gingerly apply this, making sure that you walk the paper from one end to the other. So I'm going to grab it as it's most comfortable for me here, and I'm simply going to lay this right on top of the previous die cut, and then just very slowly walk this along, making sure that it matches all the way around as best as I can get it. Give it a light burnish, and there we have a really neat application. I think it's so much fun to do this. And of course you can use any of the supplies that you like. Any white spots, I'm going to just allow the adhesive to dry fully before I address that, because the adhesive will dry clear. Now there are other layers that I can apply here. I can also add this little ring here that's cut in the same manner by using this die, also by using the smaller oval. So you do need that center one to cut this ring fully. And if you'd like to, of course, you can double that up with a different color paper, which is why I went with that violet in the background, which was spring lilac actually. And that way it's going to give me a little pop of color there. I'm now going to place this right in the middle. Here I'm also going to select some little flowers to color in. Once I'm done coloring these flowers, I can do the same thing and lay the paper right on top so as to cover the white paper and also complete this. So once that is complete, I can also add the little medallion in the center. So I've cut out the solid piece with the oval that's available. And then I went ahead and used both that same oval and then the little inlay die to cut out the sentiment, which will go right here in the center. And of course this is quite delicate, but you can apply it the same way all of the other layers are applied. If you'd like to, you can also use some foam adhesive to give this volume, depending on whether or not you're going to curve this paper, which I will be doing as per the instructions. Once I have that adhered, I am going to go ahead and adhere it directly in the center. Okay, once I have that all done, I can now start to curve this very gently before my paper is fully dry. Now to do so, I'm going to press it into the palm of my hand, and I'm not going to be too aggressive here. Now I know that I had already adhered all of the other layers, but because I use liquid adhesive, there's still some drying time between these layers, and I'm simply going to press, and I'm going to be very gentle with this paper. I don't want the paper to crack or buckle, so if you would like to, of course you can use your paper creaser and simply use the pressure back and forth using that longer edge there. Just be careful again not to accidentally crease your paper. But you should get a slight curve, just like that. And you don't need it to be too aggressive there. Okay? That is also going to go on this piece here, which you had burnished. And you're going to want to curve that also. Just get that paper fiber used to folding. It's going to break the fibers in the paper and allow it to curve a little bit more easily. And then you can, of course, do this. So get that used to folding. Okay, it's not a real fold, it's more of a curve. But now this is going to adhere right on top. Now to make it a little bit easier for myself, I am going to use double-sided adhesive. You can use Craft Perfect double-sided tissue tape. It'll make it easier. I'm now going to layer this right on top, making sure that it's equidistant all the way around. So paying attention there to the placement. And I think if I flatten it at first, it might make it a little bit easier. I'm just going to walk that paper onto the background and then very quickly continue manipulating this before it fully dries. That's why I like to double up the dry and wet adhesive, is to give myself the opportunity to apply the paper but then also have a little bit of drying time. Now I can more aggressively burnish this. It'll be a little more sturdy. Okay, we can now adhere the top and bottom portions. So I'm going to reserve the other rectangle for the moment, but I'm going to apply adhesive onto the tab. Line this up with the edge of my rectangle here and burnish that nicely. Then I'm going to apply adhesive to the other tab, and I want to give this some time to dry because it is going to pull when I curve that slightly and then adhere it to the other end. So just be careful with it. And then match up the opposite edge, making sure to apply pressure there as it domes. And you can press that together to adhere it. Now I had mentioned that I was going to add the second rectangle right on top on the back, and this is again to allow for myself to be able to write a sentiment, and then if you'd like to, of course, you could even stamp a little quote or anything like that, then add it to the back. That's the result of the card, and then of course if you want to write anything back there or stamp it, do so before adhering this. So I'm going to set this aside to dry completely. And now, to create what will be the base of the box, you're going to use this larger die, cut out 2 pieces of cardstock. You're also going to use this other shorter piece that has 3 tabs and cut out 2 pieces of cardstock that's the same color. These are going to have options for you to decorate, of course. One of these is going to become a lid, so if you would like to, you have the decorative dies included. There's the larger rectangle, and then all of the different dies here will give you different results, of course. And then there are the ones here that will either deboss your paper, or you can use the decorative pieces that look like this. There's a solid piece, and then the die on the inside will cut the layer. So these two together, for instance, will create a piece that looks like this here. And then the shorter one up here will create a layer that looks like this if you use them together. Of course, you can just cut out solids with the rectangles alone. However, with that same rectangular die, if you would like to, I'm going to show you how you can use these dies here to create the strips that you can also use to decorate the box that will be solid like this, but still have a floral motif. I wanted to make sure that I gave you a tip if you are wanting to use the beautiful dies from Tonic Studios that don't cut the edge but do deboss into your paper. We mention these a lot in the videos because it gives such a stunning result. And if you want to make sure you get a really clear embossing with that, then if you have the Tangerine, which I highly recommend, you're going to have this embossing plate, and it even indicates, as the name implies here, die embossing plate. They make it super easy. But you also get this really cushy mat, which is not something that you want to cut into, so you wouldn't, for instance, use a cutting die onto this. However, you can definitely use these dies, and technically this is not a die, but it's the metal plate, and it has the grooves in here, so you can place it right on top of your paper. And of course, it's recommended that you use a paper that has a shine or a sleek surface to it, so any mirror card or satin card from Tonic Studios will be a perfect thickness for this. So here I'm going to go ahead and tack these down, and you can use a low tack tape. I reuse my low tack tape until it's a little bit embarrassing, but that's because it still has the stick to it and it's plenty for me, and I just keep it on my machine actually. So once you have those down and you're making sure that they're not too close to each other, in fact you want to avoid any overlap, it will ruin your dies, just to let you know. And then you would feel compelled to reach out to the company and ask for a new one. And I can tell you that that's not something that is easily done. So I would advise against it, because dies are produced for a certain amount of times and then they're not reproduced. So just a little bit of advice there. But then put your top plate on top. And I just started feeding it into my machine. So I'm going to pick this up. Okay, so here's my Tangerine. It's a quite large machine compared to my work surface here, but now I'm just going to run this through, and I do not rush this because I don't want to accidentally push those dies. However, you may not be hearing much, and that's because the machine doesn't make any noise. So if you have toddlers or small children that you look after and they have a nap time and you want to get some die cutting or embossing out of the way, this is the machine for you, because you will not wake them up. So here we have the results, and you're watching this in real time. And there we have it. A perfect result every single time. Super beautiful. And of course, because the dies are consistent throughout, you're always going to get that beautiful finish on your papers. And let me show you the one with the sentiment so that way you get to see what they look like. And absolutely no effort. Now on here, if I want this to stand out a little bit more, I can definitely ink this paper despite the fact that it is a pearlescent card, and I'll get even more of a contrast in that paper detail, in the detail that is impressed onto that paper. But as you can see there with the shine, it's absolutely darling. And then I'll show you what the back looks like. The back is going to look like this, and the same over here. This happens to have a white background, so there's not much of a contrast there, but you definitely see how beautiful the results are. And the paper was already die cut with a separate plate, which comes of course with a machine as well. And this one is just meant exactly for all of the embossing that you can do. So I would recommend you do all the cutting before, as I do here. Do all of the cutting of the paper, and then have some quiet time and relax as you emboss your papers, and then you get a beautiful results there that you can use with your projects. This one here is going to create a belly band. For this, you'll cut this piece out twice, and I have it here in pearlescent ivory card, and you're going to notice there's a little portion here that is embossed as well, and I'll address that in a moment. But first let's create the base, and I'll share with you how to put that together. You're also going to want to cut out 2 of the little circles there. So before we begin, we're going to want to determine which is going to be the lid of the box, and we're going to want to go ahead and decorate that. So what I've done is that I've used this gorgeous mirror card, and in this case I'm going to adhere this right on top. I'm also going to use this oval here that I've cut out, and I did use the embossing ring that's available. That's going to go right on top here. And there are some sentiments available that you can use. There's this one here that says "Celebrate with Style," and that can go right on top. I think the papers are pretty enough, and then it'll be a nice surprise to have the colorful card inside. Mirror card on top of the pearlescent card first. Be very careful applying this to make sure it's nice and centered, because there is a score line on the side. The dies will create the embossed lines that you need to follow, so it makes it a whole lot easier. So here you do have 2 lines that you want to fold and burnish. This is going to create the side of the box. Just be sure to have that lined up very nicely. They're both mountain folds, which just means that you fold it away from yourself. So here we're going to be attaching the other piece that will become the bottom of the box. So let me go ahead and burnish these folds as well before adhering any further. Make sure to prep this paper for folding. Okay, and on here I'm going to be using these strips. I've prepared them the same way that I colored the card, which was to use the white paper as the background. I cut the decorative strip that looks just like this out of white, adhered it onto that white background, colored all of the images, and then adhered the golden paper on top. So I'm going to adhere that layer first. So that's going to fit right on top, just as the cover of the card did. And I just thought this gave it a really beautiful stained glass-like effect. So I'm going to adhere these strips first. One of them here. I'm going to lay that flat just to make it a little bit easier to center the strip as well. Flip it over and burnish. Before assembling these, I'm actually going to go ahead and prepare what's going to be the top and bottom of the box as well. So here you notice that there are 3 tabs. You're going to want to burnish all 3 of those as well, and they're all a mount and fold. Here, of course, you can decorate these sides as well with the strips. Now these 2 are going to adhere end to end. So on this thinner strip, you can apply your adhesive. And place the second piece right on top. Once you have this, you can flip this over, and on the second rectangle here, you can apply the longer strip, what will be the top, and then the longer strip of what will be the bottom. Apply your adhesive on that long tab. And I'm going to move my paper just to make it a little easier for me. But you do it, place it as you feel comfortable. Just make sure that that fold line meets the edge of that paper so that it's all nice and tidy here. You don't want anything overlapping. And then burnish your paper. Then flip this over and do the same thing on the opposite side. Now these are actually going to adhere on the corners to create a 90-degree angle there, okay? So that's going to join here to create the spine. You can overlap this and hold on to that and make sure it's really nice and straight on that corner. You can keep it open if you need to, but you just want to make sure that that's fully adhered. Adhere the bottom edge the same way, holding on to that, making sure you get a really good angle there. So I am holding this open while I hold the bottom there. Nice and straight. There we go. Making sure that those corners meet. Alright, and once I have that in place, I'm going to burnish that really nicely. Hold on to that until it dries. So now I have the spine ready to go. I'm now going to adhere the outer portion, which is going to be only these 2 tabs. This is our lid, and we're going to ignore the longer tab. This one will not get adhered. only the short ones. So if you want to, you can go one by one. These will be much easier because this tab is shorter. So you just hold on to that until it dries. You also have these pretty circles. Make sure that you fold them along that center line. And you're going to center these inside as best as you can and adhere them so that the half moon decorative portion faces inside of the box. So only adhere that solid portion. So I'm just going to eyeball this. And what you want to make sure is that it does meet the edge. And then I'm going to guesstimate wherever I place the first one. I'm going to try to match the second one as best as I can. Now, of course, this is going to be what houses our dimensional card. I thought it would be really pretty to use the debossed papers inside for a nice little surprise and also to cover the tabs. So I'm using the same mirror cardstock, which is Burgundy Rose. I don't think I had mentioned that. So this is Burgundy Rose mirror card from Tonic Studios. And place one of these here to hold together these tabs. Try to center those. Personal preference at this point, how you decorate the inside. But I do think it's important if you are going to make a box to decorate the inside as much as you do the outside, or at least to cover any open tabs or raw ends of paper. I also cut the shorter ends, so the same thing as I went ahead and debossed that paper. I've gone ahead and also cut another piece of the ivory pearlescent card to adhere to the inside. This has otherwise some raw edges with the tabs that will adhere to the inside of this box, and I find that to be a bit unsightly. So of course, whenever you have the opportunity, you want to have a really pretty professional finish to your projects. And here you have some options. Of course, you could dry emboss this or do a 3D embossing folder, for instance. It would be so pretty. However, I'm just going to keep it super simple and place this on the inside just to cover the tabs there. So there is going to be a little bit of a border all the way around, but it'll make it a really pretty finish. And the contrast between the gold and that beautiful rose, I think, is so pretty. That's going to give that a nice pretty finish on the inside. Now you can lift these little tabs a little bit while you position your beautiful card right inside. I think it is well worth the effort to go ahead and add the extra touches. I will be revisiting this off camera with a number of different Nuvo drops just to give it that extra shine. Let's do the little belly band because this is going to help us close this. And you do have some options here as well. You're going to have the tab here that folds over and the second score line. So you have to picture how this is going to go all the way around. It's going to attach to the second one, of course. So you want to fold these away from yourself. and they're going to attach along that narrow tab. So if you'd like to, you can go ahead and adhere that first, of course. So the long tab gets adhered to the shorter one. Now if you would like to, this can wrap all the way around, and it's up to you whether you want this to be something that slips on and off of this box. So of course, if you intend on adding any dimension, you can add it to the actual strip of paper, or you can make this so that it has a magnetic closure. That is entirely up to you. Make it so that the closure is right on this little tab here. So that's where you can add your magnet if you want to. This, by the way, does come with these pieces that will decorate the edge and also decorate the actual strip. So I've cut mine out of the gold color cardstock I've been using throughout. Thought it would be a nice contrast here. I think this is going to be plenty to adhere this, and I'm simply going to add a little drop of adhesive here and add my magnet. If it bothers you to see an exposed magnet, by the way, just cut a second piece of paper with the same die and then cover that up. In this case, I think I'm going to leave it exposed, at least that portion. I'm simply going to very gently fold this over and then place that second magnet on top. I'm going to shimmy it over there a little bit, add the adhesive, and then let that magnet travel right back. So I already have my placement, and I'm going to decorate this. Now I used the debossing plate that came with the die set just to go ahead and decorate the side. Now I'm going to cover this up. And this piece can go right on top, covering that second magnet and also decorating our belly band. The front here, wrap all the way around and help us close our little box. I think it's so darling. And I'm tempted to keep decorating this. I wanted to come back and share with you that I did go ahead and color in some of these flowers on the lid as well as the centers of others using different Nouveau drops. I love to collect these and use them as if they were watercolor, because they are a water-based medium, meaning that if you dilute it with water, you can pick it up with a brush and you can color with them. That's exactly what I've done here. The other option, of course, is to simply drop the medium onto your paper if you feel comfortable doing so, and just swirl it around with a pointy tool, one of the pokey tools, and just use that as if it were a brush. That's going to give you a nice little swirl also. You can definitely mix them. I've done so here. And if that does not appeal to you because maybe you're overwhelmed with choices or whatever the case may be, then the other thing that you can do is use crystal glaze. This is a clear medium. You can apply that onto anything that you color so long as it's not too wet. So allow your medium to dry, whatever you have colored, and then apply this. If you apply it as a dome, it has the same viscosity as the drops, so it will also have a dome finish, meaning that it won't dry entirely flat unless you want it to. This also works as a nice adhesive for little pearls if you like to use those in your crafting, and it's a very convenient medium to have if you don't want to invest maybe too much on other items. The other workaround, because these have a pearlescent finish, for instance the Dream Drops do, whereas this doesn't, is that you can use an Aquaflow pen, and this happens to be a glitter gloss pen. This will give your papers a nice shimmer that is metallic when you apply this. Now this is also a barrel with a water-based medium, so you do have to be careful how much you apply. I always say test it off site or off of your papers, and then you can apply it to anything that you have colored. You're going to get a nice pearlescent finish. This doesn't have any color except for the shimmer. And then if you'd like to, once that's dry, then you can apply the crystal glaze and then get your little pearlescent touch to your papers. But those are just some little tips that you can use when you're crafting. Make use of the products that you own and maybe expand on something if you haven't already tried it. But if you'd like to, the same way that I shared with you how I colored this and then applied the colorful paper on top, you can definitely do that with the drops, where you do all of your messy coloring, and then once you're done with that, you can apply your paper on top. Just be mindful of the fact that you will have to render it thinner, so that way you are able to adhere the paper on top, and that way you don't get any viscosity that's too high on the paper. And I hope that makes sense. But you can always feel free to reach out to me in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I always say, I'd love to read your comments. Feel free to use the affiliate links that are in the description bar of this video. This is available worldwide, so if you reside in the US or US territories, there's a Tonic US link. Otherwise, anywhere else in the world, you can use the Tonic UK link. That'll be there for you. And again, that's just to support this channel. If you like this content, don't forget to also leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you're new. And if you are, I welcome you. And as I always say, I do hope that you can be inspired and be blessed. And I thank you so much for watching.